Hey everyone, before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more stories like this one. As I steered off 6th Avenue toward the calm streets of North Tacoma, my body felt drained like an empty husk. 16 hours of knotting rebar and hauling steel at the Point Ruston site had left me hollow. My shoulders burned from lugging rain-soaked beams. My hands pulsed with the sting of rope burns, and no amount of rubbing them on the steering wheel could shake off the cement dust caked into my skin. All I craved was what I'd longed for every night since I was a kid in this house. A scalding shower, a meal not handed through a drive-through window, and a moment to shut my eyes without demands piling on. The streets shimmered under the city's endless drizzle. I pulled up in front of the craftsman house I'd once painted with my dad, Graham, back when he was around more than away. The maple tree out front swayed in the damp wind, just as it always did. I trudged up the porch steps, my duffel weighing down my aching shoulders, and slipped my key into the lock. It wouldn't turn. I jiggled it, tried again, but the old brass pushed back like I was an outsider. For a second, I blamed my exhaustion, but then the door swung open, and there was Diane lit by the porch light, hair tied up like she'd just left a yoga class, leggings pristine, phone still glowing in her hand. Her smile was sharp, like she'd been counting down to this moment. Behind her, Kellen, her son, not mine, sprawled on the couch, wearing my old Pacific Lutheran hoodie, his laughter echoing like he owned the place. "You're back early," Diane said, as if the lock hadn't just rejected me. "The key doesn't work," I rasped, my voice rough from dust. "We replaced them," she replied, her tone smooth and cutting as a blade. "For safety." Her voice made it clear whose safety she meant, and Kellen, reaching into a bag of chips I'd paid for, told me the rest. My grip tightened on the useless key. I stepped back onto the porch, the air biting colder, already feeling the shadow of a fight I hadn't yet named. When Diane leaned against the doorframe, still smiling, I knew this night was just the start of a larger claim waiting behind her words. Diane didn't bother with small talk. She folded her arms and said the locks were changed because I was behind on payments. She produced a folded paper from the counter, like she'd practiced the move. Back rent, utilities, household costs. She listed them, pointing to her tidy handwritten columns. $50,000. Pay it and I could stay. Behind her, Kellen let out a low whistle, tossing his phone onto the couch. "One good union paycheck, right?" "You'll manage," he said, grinning like he'd won something, pulling my hoodie tighter as if it belonged to him. I held the duffel strap, refusing to set it down. My gaze slid past Diane's smug look, noting details like I would on a job site when a beam didn't align. New screws shone on the strike plate, silver against the worn brass. A locksmith's card peeked out from under a scented candle on the hall table. Their planning was right there, waiting for me to see. "Did Dad approve this?" I asked, my voice steady despite the words catching in my throat. Diane's smirk held firm. "He's consulting overseas. While he's gone, this is my house, my rules." Her certainty hit harder than her numbers. This wasn't about money or fairness. It was about control, about deciding who got to stand in that doorway. I let the silence hang, my grip loosening on the key. No yelling, no pleading. I stepped back, the porch creaking under my boots. Diane lifted her chin like she'd triumphed, but I was already piecing together what her act had revealed. I turned and walked to my truck, the night air sharper now, my mind on the red file I'd never opened until this moment. The porch light dimmed behind me as I reached the truck, but the weight in my chest pulled me further back than the street. Memories clung to that house like damp in the walls, each one vivid now that I was locked out. After Mom's funeral, Dad remarried faster than I could process. Diane arrived with boxes smelling of department stores, stacking them over the cinnamon candles Mom used to light in winter. Soon, Mom's photos vanished, replaced by generic prints of bridges and skylines that meant nothing to us. The cinnamon scent faded, swapped for lavender sprays and a fridge full of Kellen's energy drinks. Dad thought he was giving me stability when he took overseas contracts, but the house never felt steady. Every dripping faucet or rattling furnace was mine to fix, crawling under sinks, tightening bolts, carrying the house like I carried rebar, quietly hoping someone would notice. No one did. On my 21st birthday, Dad flew back briefly. He took me to a notary's office in the Stadium District, a place smelling of old paper and ink. He handed me documents with little explanation, saying they were for security. I signed where he pointed, half aware, wondering why a birthday gift felt so formal. When I asked what it meant, he said to keep the file safe, maybe never needed. Think of it as a map, he said, one you might never unfold. I stored that red file in the lockbox in my truck, unopened, trusting him. Now, standing in the cold street after Diane's demand, I knew where that map waited. I wouldn't stand on the porch begging for entry to a home that was once mine. The truck's engine carried me away, down the slick curve of Ruston Way, where salt water mingled with diesel from the construction site. Steel beams rose against the night sky, tarps flapping like restless sails. I pulled my duffel from the cab, spread it on a plywood platform under the scaffolding, and wrapped a neon safety vest around me for warmth. It wasn't cozy, but it was mine, and no one could lock me out of concrete's still setting. The night pressed heavy. I lay flat, rain tapping through tarp gaps, cranes swaying above like giant shadows. Every ache reminded me of the day's labor, but the silence cut deeper. I thought of the house as it once was, cinnamon candles in the kitchen, Mom's hugs that fixed everything. Those ghosts filled the cold air, and for once, I let them linger. Before dawn, I sat up, breath clouding in the chill, and reached for the lockbox behind my seat. The red file sat there, edges worn from years of being moved, unopened. My hands paused, then pulled it out. Inside were 3 documents, a recorded deed naming me sole owner of the North 26 property, dated my 21st birthday, a limited power of attorney for emergencies, and an unsigned letter in Dad's handwriting. The paper shook as I read. If the air ever feels tight at home, this is why. The words landed heavier than the scaffolding above. I'd carried proof without knowing it, a weapon hidden in silence. I'd thought loyalty meant waiting, fixing leaks, paying bills, enduring Diane's rules. Now the truth lay in my lap, sharp as any tool I'd swung, and I knew it was time to decide how to wield it as morning light touched the beams overhead. By 8 a.m., I was striding up Pacific Avenue, the red file pressed against my ribs like a shield. I hadn't slept much, Diane's smirk and Dad's note burning in my mind. Exhaustion felt lighter than her taunt. I stopped at a narrow brick building. Its glass door marked Ian Brackett, attorney at law. The office smelled of wood polish and coffee. Ian wasn't the polished lawyer of TV dramas, thinning hair, slightly crooked tie, but his eyes held the calm of someone who'd seen people at their lowest. I sat across from him, opened the file, and told him everything. Diane's lock change, her $50,000 demand, Kellen's laugh as he wore my hoodie. My voice broke only once, recalling the key refusing to turn. Ian listened, nodding, jotting notes in neat block letters. When I finished, he tapped the deed. "This is solid," he said. "Recorded, valid, clear. We don't argue with them. The law speaks." Washington law required a 20-day notice to end a month-to-month tenancy. If they resisted, I'd file an unlawful detainer in Pierce County Superior Court. The court would issue a writ of restitution, and the sheriff would enforce it. I frowned. "So I can't just—" "No," he interrupted gently. "No changing locks back. No tossing their stuff. That's a legal self-help eviction. Even as the owner, you wait. You document every call, text, demand. Show the court who's reasonable." His calm gave my anger a path. We arranged for a process server to deliver the notice. Ian gave me a checklist for an evidence binder. Photos, bills, proof of payments, messages. Leaving his office, the drizzle on Pacific felt less oppressive, more like clarity. I had a plan, not quick, but sure. That night, in my truck's cab, I balanced a yellow pad on my knee. The deed opened beside me. Anger urged me to scrawl in all caps to throw Diane's words back. But Ian's advice held. Stay measured, professional. So I wrote, "No rent is owed. I am the recorded owner." Enclosed is the 20-day notice to vacate. Direct further communication to counsel. I typed it neatly, printed 2 copies, and sealed one in an envelope marked with Diane's name. The other went by certified mail. Undeniable. At dawn, the process server took the envelope. I parked 2 blocks from the house, hands gripping the wheel, watching the porch through a gap in the hedges. At 9 a.m., Diane stepped out in slippers, phone in hand, coffee steaming. She grabbed the envelope, tore it open, and her scream echoed like a siren. Curtains twitched in neighboring houses. Dogs barked. A car braked. Kellen stumbled to the door, hair messy, hoodie slipping. He snatched the papers, mouth moving as he read. Curses flew. Soon, his face was online, a shaky video spreading fast. She's heartless, he spat, throwing out family. Comments flooded in, strangers cursing me, cousins demanding answers, old friends acting like they'd always known I was cruel. I didn't respond. I screenshotted every post, saved every voicemail, logged every name. Proof wasn't in likes or outrage, it was in binders for a judge. The 20-day clock started quietly, but Diane never left a stage empty. On day 5, 2 Tacoma police officers tapped my truck window at the construction site. Diane claimed I was trespassing, harassing her. I showed the deed and notice. They exchanged a look, familiar with family drama, and left, saying, "It's a civil matter." I noted the time, date, and badge numbers. A week later, Diane texted about a restraining order. Her words formal, but empty. No order came. She told relatives Dad had promised the house to her and Kellen in spirit, as if that trumped a deed. I saved every call, transcribed voicemails, and filed them. I met Ian twice more, his calm balancing Diane's chaos. He told me to photograph the property, especially Diane's claimed rooms and log utilities I'd paid. I printed receipts, marked dates, stacked them neatly. The binder grew like scaffolding around a rising structure. Mrs. Sato, the retired teacher across the street, stopped me one day. She'd seen the locksmith's van the day before the locks changed and offered to testify. I thanked her and added her name to my witness list. As the deadline neared, anonymous texts begged for mercy, for family. But their mercy meant giving up my home. I copied each message into the binder and moved on, the countdown pulling me toward the courthouse. The deadline passed, and Diane didn't budge. Ian filed the unlawful detainer, and soon we stood in Pierce County Superior Court, its high ceilings smelling of varnished wood and paper dust. Diane wore a crisp blazer, hair pulled tight, eyes defiant. Kellen fidgeted behind her, phone in hand, needing an audience. When the commissioner called the case, Diane spun a tale of family equity, Dad's supposed promises, informal rent I owed for growing up there. But she had no proof, no lease, no receipts, no legal thread. Ian laid out the deed, the 20-day notice, the binder with photos, receipts, and statements. My name echoed across the pages. The commissioner's ruling was sharp. Possession restored to me. Writ of restitution issued. Interference banned. Diane's mouth opened, but the gavel fell, final. Outside, Kellen ranted into his phone, calling me a traitor. Passers-by glanced curiously, but Ian guided me down the steps, the order in hand, the date set. The ground felt solid for the first time in weeks. On the writ's morning, I stood on the curb, binder under my arm, waiting for the deputy. The street was still, rain dripping from the eaves. Then a familiar sedan appeared, Dad, thinner but steadier, as if distance had cleared his haze. "Leora," he said, his voice carrying apology and strength. "I've filed for divorce. I should have done it sooner. I see her now and what I left you with." I searched his face for doubt, but he held steady. He explained the deed was his shield for me, fearing this day. The sheriff's deputy arrived, his uniform cutting through the tension. Diane emerged, arms crossed, Kellen trailing with half-packed boxes. Under the deputy's gaze, they cleared out their claims. At the doorway, Diane turned, her voice sharp. "You owe us for family." Before I could speak, Dad stepped in, his words steady. Family doesn't build belonging. By sunset, the house was quiet, their clutter gone, leaving only the furnace's hum and the floors creak, mine at last. I stepped inside, ready for the silence. That evening, I walked barefoot across the hardwood, each step sure. I flipped on lights, not from fear, but from ritual. The house glowed, as if it had waited patiently through years of noise. In the living room, I hung Mom's framed photo, box too long, replacing Diane's bland prints. Her smile calmed the air like no candle could. I replaced the locks next, unscrewing the old hardware, fitting new ones with care. The keys, cut fresh on 6th Avenue, gleamed with promise. The door scar from the locksmith's drill needed fixing, so I scheduled a carpenter. Over coffee on Ruston Way, I made lists, boundaries, maintenance, choices. I sent certified court orders to the utilities, closed Diane's unauthorized accounts, and drafted a final letter through Ian's office, ending contact. When I locked the door with my key, the house was no battlefield. It was a beginning, a place to rebuild on my terms. The walls held my history, but the silence was mine. Standing in the doorway, I knew my story was finally my own.